They say the most terrifying warnings are the ones that come too late. They're watching me. If anything happens, tell the FBI about the folder in my closet. That wasn't a scene from a movie. According to investigators, those were the words connected to the final phone call made by Savannah Guthrie's mother, just hours before she vanished without a trace. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let that sink in. A woman doesn't say something like that unless she's afraid. Really afraid. The kind of fear that makes you stop worrying about sounding dramatic and start worrying about staying alive. And that's exactly why this story has shaken so many people to their core. Savannah Guthrie is a face millions of Americans trust. Calm. Composed. The voice that delivers breaking news without flinching. But while viewers were sipping their morning coffee, a nightmare was unfolding off camera. One that no amount of professionalism could prepare her for. Her mother, Nancy Guthrie, had vanished. No goodbye, no explanation. Just silence. It happened in Tucson, in the quiet, affluent neighborhood of Catalina Foothills, the kind of place where people leave porch lights on and assume danger happens somewhere else. Nancy was last seen late Saturday night, between 9:30 and 9:45 p.m., a narrow window, a detail investigators would later emphasize again and again. By Sunday morning, something felt wrong. Nancy missed church. That might sound small, it wasn't. She never missed church. Family members tried calling. No answer. Texts went unread. By 11 a.m., concern turned into panic. They drove to her home expecting an explanation. Maybe she overslept. Maybe her phone died. Instead, they walked into a crime scene. Police tape, flashing lights, officers moving carefully through rooms that should have felt safe. Investigators would later confirm signs of a struggle. And then came the detail that made this case explode into national attention. A note, not a casual note, not a reminder scribbled on paper, a message investigators immediately flagged as a possible ransom note. Authorities won't reveal exactly what it said. Not yet. They say releasing details could compromise leads. But that silence speaks volumes, because when law enforcement goes quiet this fast, it usually means one thing. They believe someone else is involved. This wasn't a woman who wandered off. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Sheriff investigators would later say it plainly. Nancy did not leave willingly. And then there's the phone call. The warning. Ask yourself this. If your mother called you and said people were watching her, would you brush it off? Would you tell yourself she was stressed? Or would you feel that cold wave of dread hit your spine? The kind that doesn't go away. Because here's the part that doesn't add up. If Nancy feared for her life, why was she still at home? If someone was watching her, how long had it been happening? Days? Weeks? And what could possibly be inside a folder serious enough to mention the FBI by name? This is where the story stops being a disappearance and starts feeling like a warning no one understood in time. By the end of that weekend, investigators had already shifted their focus. This was no longer just a missing persons case. It was something darker, something deliberate. And the most disturbing detail hadn't even come from the crime scene yet, because when authorities began retracing Nancy Guthrie's final hours, they realized the phone call wasn't the beginning of the mystery. It was the last clue she left behind. Between 9:30 and 9:45 p.m., something happened inside that quiet Tucson home that investigators believe changed everything. That narrow 15-minute window is now one of the most scrutinized stretches of time in this entire case. Because before it, Nancy Guthrie was still there, alive, accounted for. And after it, she was gone. No neighbors reported screams. No security cameras caught a clear abduction. No frantic 911 call was made from the house. Just silence. The kind that makes detectives uneasy, because silence usually means planning. According to Chris Nanos, deputies believe Nancy was last seen inside her Catalina Foothills residence late Saturday night. It's an area known for privacy, winding roads, and large properties. Beautiful, but unforgiving when something goes wrong unseen. When family members arrived Sunday morning, they didn't find an unlocked door in a quiet house. They found evidence that something had interrupted Nancy's routine abruptly. Furniture out of place, subtle signs that didn't scream chaos, but whispered it. The kind of details only trained eyes catch, and only criminals try to minimize. Investigators quickly determined this wasn't a voluntary disappearance. Sheriff Nanos would later say what many had already begun to fear. She didn't walk away. She didn't leave on her own. And she didn't go willingly. That single statement changed everything. Because once police believe someone didn't leave willingly, the case stops being about where someone went and starts being about who took them. Inside the house, officers discovered a note. Authorities are being extremely careful about how they describe it. They won't say where it was found, they won't say how long it was, and they absolutely won't say what it demands. But sources speaking to E! Online confirmed what many suspected almost immediately. The note was flagged as a possible ransom message. That word alone, ransom, sent shockwaves through the investigation. They don't show up in misunderstandings. They are written when someone wants leverage, when someone believes they have control, and when someone expects fear to do the rest of the work. But here's where things start to feel off. If this was about money, why target Nancy Guthrie? She wasn't a public figure. She wasn't wealthy in a flashy headline-grabbing way. And yet, the criminals, whoever they are, clearly believed she was valuable. So what kind of value were they really after? Sheriff Nanos addressed the public again, this time with a tone that felt heavier. He acknowledged investigators were pursuing a kidnapping theory, and then he said something that stopped people cold. I believe she was abducted, yes. She didn't walk from there. She didn't go willingly. That statement, later echoed by CBS News, confirmed what many had been trying not to think. Nancy Guthrie was taken. Not lost. Taken. And yet, there was no immediate ransom demand delivered to the family. No call, no text, no instructions. Just a note left behind, and a woman gone. Ask yourself this. If you were planning a ransom, wouldn't you want your demands heard as quickly as possible? Wouldn't you want panic to set in immediately? Unless money wasn't the primary motive. Unless the note wasn't the real message. Because by this point, investigators had already begun retracing Nancy's last communications, her calls, her messages, her routines, and that's when they realized something deeply unsettling. The most important clue might not be what was left behind in the house. It might be what Nancy tried to say before she disappeared, because as detectives dug deeper into the timeline, one detail began to eclipse everything else. A warning that suggested Nancy knew she was in danger long before anyone came through her door. And once that realization set in, the case stopped being about a missing woman and started becoming about a secret someone was desperate to keep buried. They're watching me. They come from certainty. When investigators began combing through Nancy Guthrie's final communications, one detail rose above everything else. A phone call that now sits at the center of the case, not because it was long, not because it was dramatic, but because of what it implied. If anything happens, she reportedly said, tell the FBI about the folder in my closet. Think about that for a moment. People don't casually reference the FBI. They don't say it out of habit. And they definitely don't say it unless they believe whatever they know is bigger than local police, bigger than coincidence, bigger than a misunderstanding. This wasn't a cry for help. It was a warning. Investigators immediately focused on the language. They're watching me. Plural. Not one person, not an unknown noise, not a vague fear. Watching implies time, surveillance, repetition, someone being observed long enough to notice a pattern. So how long had Nancy felt this way? Days? Weeks? Longer? Friends and family began quietly telling authorities that Nancy had seemed unsettled recently. Not frantic, not unstable, just alert, careful with what she said. Careful with what she shared, the kind of caution that only appears when someone believes they've crossed an invisible line. And then there's the folder. A folder doesn't scream emotion. It screams preparation. It suggests documents, evidence, records, something tangible that could be handed over, something someone didn't want found, unless the worst happened. That single detail is believed to be what triggered federal interest. Because once local investigators heard those words, the case crossed a threshold. This was no longer just a possible abduction. This was a potential federal matter. And not long after, the Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved. That escalation doesn't happen lightly. The FBI typically steps in when there's reason to believe a crime crosses jurisdictions, involves organized coordination, or contains information tied to broader criminal activity. So what did they see here? A woman who believed she was being watched, a possible ransom note that didn't immediately lead to demands, and a warning about hidden information. Those pieces don't usually belong to the same puzzle. And yet here they are. What's even more unsettling is this. There is no record of Nancy calling police herself, no official report, no formal complaint, which raises an uncomfortable question. Was she afraid to go to authorities? Or did she believe the danger was already too close? For Savannah Guthrie, that realization is almost unbearable to imagine. Receiving a message like that, wondering if you missed something, replaying conversations in your head, searching for signs you didn't recognize at the time. And here's the contradiction that keeps investigators awake at night. If Nancy had information dangerous enough to mention the FBI, why was it still in her house? Why not hand it over immediately? Unless she believed keeping it hidden was safer, unless she thought she still had time. But time, as it turns out, was the one thing she didn't have. As federal agents and local detectives began searching for this mysterious folder, another troubling possibility emerged, that whoever took Nancy may have been looking for the same thing. And if that's true, then the disappearance wasn't random. It was targeted, planned, and executed with chilling precision. Because if someone was watching Nancy, they didn't just know where she lived. They knew what she had. And the most terrifying question of all is this: did they find it? Because if the folder is missing, it could explain everything. And if it's still hidden somewhere inside that house, it could mean Nancy believed one last thing before she vanished, that the truth would eventually come out. It may have been meant to protect someone else. Silence is often louder than screams. In the days after Nancy Guthrie vanished, that silence became almost unbearable. No confirmed sightings, no demands delivered to the family, no proof of life. Just investigators moving in and out of a house that once felt safe, now stripped down to evidence markers. And hovering over everything was that warning. They're watching me. When you circle back to those words now, they don't sound emotional, they sound calculated. As if Nancy knew exactly how little time she had and exactly what she needed to say before it ran out. For Savannah Guthrie, this wasn't just a disappearance. It was a message she could never stop replaying. Every child imagines getting one last call from a parent, but no one imagines it coming with instructions and fear and a reference to the FBI. Think about how heavy that must feel, knowing your mother may have been trying to protect you, or warn you, or shield someone else entirely, and knowing that whatever she was afraid of didn't stop when she hung up the phone. Investigators have confirmed that federal authorities are now deeply involved. The presence of the Federal Bureau of Investigation signals that this case is no longer being treated as a routine abduction. Something about the evidence, the timing, and the alleged warning suggests a larger web, one that may stretch beyond a single home in Arizona. And here's the part that still doesn't sit right. There has been no rush to release information, no dramatic press conferences revealing new clues, no updates confirming the contents of the note, no confirmation about whether the folder was found or if it's missing. That kind of restraint usually means one thing: authorities believe someone is listening. Cases like this often hinge on a single miscalculation, one assumption made by the wrong person, one detail overlooked because it seemed insignificant at the time. And Nancy's final words are now being examined from every possible angle, not just for what they say, but for what they don't. She didn't say who was watching her, she didn't say what was in the folder, she didn't say why she waited. Which raises a chilling possibility. What if the warning wasn't meant to stop what was coming? What if Nancy already believed the outcome was inevitable? Sometimes people don't leave messages hoping to be saved. Sometimes they leave them hoping the truth will survive them. That idea changes everything. Because if Nancy believed her disappearance was unavoidable, then the focus shifts from rescue to revelation, from where she is to what she knew. And if that's the case, then the folder isn't just evidence, it's a motive. Somewhere between that final phone call and the moment investigators sealed off her home, a line was crossed. A secret may have moved from being dangerous to being deadly. And here's the part that should unsettle every single person watching this. If Nancy Guthrie was being watched, she wasn't the only one at risk. People who monitor don't stop once, they wait, they observe, they adapt. Which means the real danger may not have ended with her disappearance. It may have only begun. So now the question isn't just what happened to Nancy Guthrie. The question is what happens when the folder is finally opened, and whether the truth inside it is something someone would do anything to keep hidden. If you've been following this case closely, share your thoughts below. Do you believe the warning was about money or something far more serious? And do you think Nancy's message was meant to save herself or to expose something much bigger? Because until that folder is found, one thing remains painfully clear. Nancy Guthrie didn't vanish without leaving a reason behind.